Hey Dana,
Hi, Dave.
how you doing?
I think we're just waiting on Neal to join us and then we'll get started.
Let's do
Perfect.
it.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I am so excited that everyone's here, and I'm even more excited for this conversation. Today, we have a couple of awesome experts from PredictAP and REdirect Consulting to talk about the results from our latest partner survey. But first, I want to go over a few housekeeping notes. For those of you who haven't been to one of these before, my name is Dana Grundy and I run the marketing department here at PredictAP. Over the course of today's conversation, please feel free to ask questions and say hi using the Q&A and chat panels. We'll try to bring as many questions as possible into our conversation, but if we run out of time for any reason, we'll be sure to follow up later. Our scheduled presentation time for today is about 60 minutes, but if you have to leave early, we will be sending out the recording after we wrap up. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and let our speakers introduce themselves. Please welcome Neal Cousino, Manager of AI Automation Services at REdirect, and David Stifter, CEO and founder of PredictAP. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cool. So first of all, why don't you both kind of tell people who might not know who you are and provide a little context for why we're here today. So Dave, I'll hand it to you first.
Sure. So I'm Dave Stifter, founder and CEO of PredictAP. Before Predict was the thing, I worked at a large real estate private equity firm called Colony Capital, which later became Digital Bridge. So I was there for almost 20 years. A lot of different roles there, but ended up asking too many questions about Yardi and ended up running tech there. That's where I met REdirect. They were one of the great consultants we used, and so the relationship continued after my Colony days. But came across this real tenacious business problem around AP coding, and I got so into the problem I founded PredictAP, and now we're the best at solving that problem. But it's a small Yardi and MRI world, and so it's always great to work with REdirect, and looking forward to the conversation today. We've had a lot of mutual customers, and we're going to talk about some of the things we learned from them.
Awesome. Yeah, and hey everybody, I'm Neal Cousino with REdirect Consulting. So for those of you who may not be familiar, REdirect's a technology services company, and we're totally focused on the real estate industry. So services can include implementation support, business process consulting, managed services for system administration, and then my role is leading our team in terms of AI automation. So we provide certain point solutions or repeatable solutions for clients. We can also build bespoke or custom solutions, or even partner in an ongoing engagement to support you with your adoption. And my background has been in enterprise technology, but especially focused in the real estate industry. So prior to REdirect, I was working in-house at a large real estate investment trust. And so I've worked as both an internal lead as well as external consultant.
Awesome. So that's some great context. And now you all know why these two are going to be perfect for leading this conversation. So let's go ahead and just dive into the questions that we have to get through today. We have a lot of ground to cover and only about 56 more minutes to get through it all. So we're going to start off looking at like the state of the market. Um, and we'll start with the big picture. So based on what you're seeing across the industry, where would you both say commercial real estate is today in terms of its AI adoption and automation? And Neal, I'll hand this one to you first.
Yeah, so I mean, both from our survey results as well as just experience talking with clients, I think the general sense that, most companies are still in early stages with AI, exploring what can be done, maybe some limited implementation. Um, I think it's makes sense. A lot of companies will start off with what they've already have in their tech stack. So a lot of companies are Microsoft shops and trying things with Copilot. Um, so that's definitely majority. I think there's a smaller group that's also testing out some of the new features that leading property management systems are putting out. So things in the realm of insights from AI, or AI helping out with your support questions about how to use the tool. Um, so there's clients assessing results from those new features, and then clients are also implementing certain point solutions or like specific use cases. So that could be things like, PredictAP, invoice processing, or bank rec automation. So something that's narrowly focused. And then I think there's even a smaller group that's getting into custom solutions or building things unique to their business, like operations dashboards. And I think companies that are getting into that realm, like pushing the innovation, really being on the bleeding edge, a lot of times they're looking at so many different options of what they could do. It's hard to prioritize and build alignment around where to start. So yeah, that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, I totally. It's interesting to me because I think there's always this feeling that hey, real estate's behind the times a little bit, and I actually think with AI they've thought about it much sooner. I think the initial evaluation, maybe even jumping into the pool a bit quick. So I think there's interest there, and I think it's an interesting time because I think the reason a lot of real estate problems have lagged automation is because real estate by its nature, it's local, right? Real estate itself is local. It's you have a building in a spot, and that spot's unique, and the building's unique. And so firms evolve and develop over time, first and foremost as deal firms, right? They're focused on deals and cap rates and markets and locations and all that. And this back office operational thing of how do you run those buildings evolves over time. And as a result, every company is different. I think the way companies approach these problems is different. Every install of Yardi and MRI is different. These systems all allow for a great deal of customization. And so as tech comes up, if it's not really purpose built for real estate, it can be very difficult to adopt. And the interesting thing about AI is it has that same challenge, but the nature of AI is that it can be tuned, it can learn, right? And really good point solutions can craft themselves and evolve to understand a company's specific nuances of how they do things. And so I think this is where real estate may really catch up with AI in that these tools are built to understand the nuance of every company if they're built well. And so I think here maybe real estate uses this to catch up on a number of problems. But I think that the reason AI, tech adoption has been challenging for real estate may be addressed with AI a lot better than other previous tech revolutions that have happened.
So I'm curious then, Dave, you mentioned that you think that, some of these companies have maybe adapted AI a little bit faster than they would have adapted other types of technology. Um, for other organizations that might be wondering whether they are early adopters, so wondering whether they're ahead of the curve or whether they're following behind, what do you think a relatively mature approach to AI looks like in CRE today?
Yeah, so if you're asking yourself if you're are you truly using it for anything? So I think, and there's two kind of big buckets we can talk about. One is personal enablement. I think this is a great place to start for anyone. As I think as time goes on, the world changes, and if as a person, as an individual, as a person in my career, if I don't adapt, I become less relevant, and so all of us from a personal enablement point of view should be understanding these tools from how do I use this to help me organize my day, help me respond to what I need to do, help me edit things, help me polish things, and it's really great at that. And so if a firm should have a way to allow personal enablement uses safely. That's kind of step one. And I think folks are approaching that. Microsoft's always good at having an easy, simple way with Copilot and other things. Then there's Cloud and Chat, and there's issues around security and all that. But that's step one. Step two is, are you looking at, and just to be really clear here, I don't think no firm should say, oh, I need AI, right? Like that's a backwards approach. If you have, and this is a little bit where people maybe jumped in a little early, where they wanted AI, and it's like, well, what, you're buying a solution. Well, what's the problem? And so I think it's more about being intentional with where are there problems that have been previously difficult to solve, and can these new tools solve it well? And that's where I think organizations who are taking a more mature approach have a path of understanding these and I'm always a fan of a more agile approach where you take small incremental things. Neal mentioned bank rec, not an AI problem, but a great problem, and everyone should solve that one first, right? Like this, so there's this incremental approach of let's solve real problems, let's have a path, let's make it work in the actual workflow. This is the other thing I think with AI is if you have a bunch of demos, a bunch of proof of concepts and MVPs that look great in the meeting, and then they're left on the shelf, well, that's not real AI, right? That's just a science project. So having that, and then having an overall strategy of what you want to achieve, what should be built, what should be bought, what should be part of your core stack, and then all the work. And this goes back to kind of clean data again for the evergreen problem of every organization. Is a lot of these AI solutions do require some good data cleanliness and all that. But a mature organization should have a plan both on personal enablement, on kind of incremental discrete tasks that should go, and an overall vision of what can be more substantially changed over time with AI and with every tool. Again, this is just AI is just a component of an overall plan to make the business better.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. And I guess coming at it from the consulting standpoint, we love to utilize frameworks and forums and that kind of thing. So if we're thinking about it in terms of a broader organizational AI transformation, um, we Dave was talking about doing personal enablement first, trying things out on a small scale. I think another part is having some kind of foundation in place in terms of your vision for the use of AI and how that'll um, be helping the organization improve. Foundation would also include things like choosing what are the tools that work well in our technology landscape based on what technologies we already have and what we want to accomplish. And then having a sense of like permitted uses, prohibited uses. So that kind of lays a ground rule for exploration. And then with a foundation in place like that, you um, also have an early adoption where you might have a select group of people. Could be representatives from different departments that are selected, maybe people who are more open to change and innovation, to come up with some initial use cases and build something that's tangible to show to others, which would be showcased to expand even further throughout the organization. So yeah, having like departmental leads tends to be a good way to approach things, and then a structure for prioritizing ideas that are coming in based on your company's overall strategy, savings, return on investment, risk avoidance. And I think it's also useful to have some kind of forum, maybe like a committee that would be sharing ideas and learnings and have some accountability for progress on the goals that you're setting.
Um, so I'm curious then, we kind of touched on this, but going into AI adoption simply with the goal of we want to add AI to our tech stack to say that we're using AI, not the best plan, right? Um, so then how do you kind of differentiate which business problems do require and would benefit from the application of AI and those that maybe need a different type of tech or maybe just need a better process implementation?
Yeah, the the point that Dave was making earlier of looking at the problems themselves, I think is very true. So, like, regardless of AI being on the scene, we want to start with the business problem and map out what are the steps involved in that problem. And for, each incremental step in that activity, there might be a different technology involved. So we mentioned like bank reconciliation before. So to use that as an example, like, first we're retrieving data from banking institutions and your property management system. So that step was well suited for custom reporting, which is something that's been around for a long time. Um, After that next step, we're working through matching up the transactions. So part of that might just be, code procedures that are logical and doing the same thing every time. There can also be an aspect of building in AI to come up with insights on the fly. So maybe that's a step that involves the new AI technologies. And then to round off the process, once you found all the matches, you're loading the updates back into your property management system. So that would involve updates via database integration. So yeah, it's really like breaking down what are the steps in the process and then what building blocks do I have at my disposal in terms of different technologies to accomplish it in the most efficient way.
Yeah,
Dave, okay.
yeah, yeah. For me, it's I think it's there's also an aspect of how the business and the IT folks are interacting. So everything Neil said is totally right on. And again, I'm just going to keep re-emphasizing, like find those small wins because I think this momentum's also a play, a factor here. You start to get wins, and that builds buy-in. You start to get, meetings with nothing resulting, and you lose people. And so making those initial forays successful um, is great. I think the other challenge here is this is a bit of a new world where the capabilities of the business users to develop things is higher, and I know we'll get to this a little bit later, but I think there is a philosophical approach from the IT staff around being a sheriff or being a shepherd, right? And uh, I think traditionally there's been more of a sheriff approach where even the term shadow IT implies like we got to stamp this out. It cannot exist, right? But if you think about why it exists, why people do things, it's not to people generally don't do more work just for the sake of it, right? They're generally doing things to address a challenge, and it sometimes takes a long time to fix those challenges when there's competing priorities, and people say, "Oh, I'll just do it myself," which is understandable and also not necessarily a bad mindset. If you think about, and I worked for very large organizations, and a lot of people just, went through the motions and worked a 9 to 5 and did their job, and that was it. And at 5 o'clock comes, they're probably not thinking about these problems. But some people did. Some people, thought about the problems and wanted to make a change. And that's the problem with the sheriff is those folks who first off understand enough of what your business is doing to like understand what should happen or what they think should happen, but then care enough to actually go in and do it. Like that's gold. Those are the folks you want to encourage. And the fear I have if you take such if you don't have a nuanced approach to this is the sheriff can at maybe at best turn those go-getters into 9 to 5 people, or maybe that's at worst. At best, they just learn to hide their work better, right? And shadow IT becomes harder to detect. So I think that's where the shepherd concept comes in. Is like, if I think the real goal to this is sometimes finding those people who do really want to do more, do better. At Colony, I had lots of people, Tay and Chris Hoyman and Yasmin, who just did a different podcast, and she gave me a shout out. So I'm gonna give Yasmin a shout out here. Was a user who really understood this stuff and brought that knowledge to bear on making really great solutions. And so taking that sheriff approach, you're going to end up, I guarantee you'll end up with a better solution. It's hard, and you have to talk to more people, listen, understand, and all that. But I think that's the other new paradigm that's kind of forming here because it's so easy to build. And people have to figure that out.
Cool. Um, okay, so I'm gonna have Neil answer this next question first because Dave, I know you're gonna have a little bit of a biased answer, but Neil, where are you seeing the strongest use cases today for AI? Which business functions and processes are delivering the most
Mhm.
tangible value from AI and automation?
Yeah, well, I can't help myself from giving the best consulting answer, which is that the strongest use case is always whatever organization you're working in. Um, but joking aside, I think really everybody can find good ways to leverage AI. You all are the most intimately familiar with your work and know what are the pain points, and with some basic understanding of what AI is good at, you can infer the best ways to use it and maybe try to build things yourself, like Dave was saying, or reach out to technology professionals if you're getting beyond your means. But I guess to be more specific, AI, or as we refer to large language models specifically, uh, have really more of a non-deterministic skill set, doing things differently rather than consistently every time. So like one area that we've seen strong use cases is within leasing. So it could be things like outreach or following up with leads that are coming in. There's a few strong point solutions in the market that are using AI to handle those communications. Um, or even another use case in leasing would be given that AI is good at coming up with insights, you can ask specific questions about unstructured documents. So give it a lease agreement, ask for something you're trying to find in it, and then of course go back and confirm whatever it has told you. Um, and then another area with similar idea of getting kind of like AI to be another set of eyes on things. I know there's a lot of organizations using AI to review investments or a different perspective on deals. Um, so those are big ones. And I, of course, would also say there's a lot that can be done in accounting and finance with repeatable activities as well, because there's some high volume activities in that area.
Like AP invoice coding.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my favorite use case. Um, yeah, I think there's Neal's definitely hit most of them. Uh, I think it's people are figuring out, and the point he made at the start about deterministic, non-deterministic. I think that's going to be a real key skill to understand which tool to use where. LLMs are not all of AI, and LLMs are great at um, kind of refining ideas and spotting, spotting trends and, variance analysis. It's great at analysis, I'd say more than reporting. A straight SQL report is still better. I have this little challenge for folks. A lot of real estate runs in Excel still, and it will for a long time. And back in my analyst days, we were really good at Excel and Excel macros. It's funny because it's kind of a mirror of talking about LLMs making creation accessible to the common user. Excel macros did the same thing. You could do a lot with an Excel macro, and I challenge people now to take two Excel spreadsheets where you have some matching data and go in Excel, do a macro, do a VLOOKUP, do some sorts and all that, and see how long it takes, and then go run it 10 times. In Excel, you're going to get the same answer 10 times. If you throw those same two sheets into an LLM, ask it to join on certain things and query it, you're going to get different answers 10 times. First it's going to take longer and you get different answers. Now, the LLM could build the macro. It's funny. That's the funny thing. The LLMs can build the thing, um, but not necessarily run the thing. And this is something people are gonna figure out. But when it comes to, you know, I still think there's absolutely still a use case for custom reports because you know exactly what you're going to get. What do you define as occupied, right? What do you define as a whatever the concept is? There's a lot of things that you need to clearly define and should give you the same answer every time. Now, if you take those outputs from a SQL report or a YSL report, something like that, and run them through a model, then you can start to get some interesting analysis out of it. So I think Neal hit all the major use cases. I think the other part of this is understanding what folks should focus on. And then again, I think the use cases around personal enablement are just there's so much you can do. Getting into agents and task management. I have agents on me all the time to keep me in line and get me doing my things. And I didn't follow up with this or go do that. It's very helpful, especially for folks that need a little. I have lots of ideas, but it's sometimes it's hard for me to keep on track with them, and it's been very very helpful for me to have more tools to remind me of kind of what I need to get done when, and then do it for a certain respect, and I can review and all that. So that's an area where I think we're just scratching the surface, and then I think the interesting part will be what are those next problems. I think the more judgment involved, the harder they are, and we're starting to get the first round of judgment-based problems. But I think we'll definitely see more and more of these tasks be handled well, and then we'll see probably a more best-in-class approach take place, and then we'll see what the big ERPs do as well. But it's an interesting time.
Hmm. Um, so I think we're seeing a growing interest in using AI to analyze existing business data to surface insights. Where do you see the greatest opportunity in that capacity? And where do you think organizations need to be careful with, well, especially with things like financial reporting? Like how is this helping and how might caution be a good plan?
Yeah, I see. So it's funny because I see, some of the big ERPs already have agent marketplaces, and I see one that's being pushed pretty heavily, which is an agent to approve payments. And to me, that's kind of terrifying. I think we shouldn't let new tech remove the lessons we learned from history, right? Which is segregation of, some fundamental things in accounting that are very important. Segregation of duties, like bank rec. Bank rec is the segregation of duty control. It is the one where when people want to defraud you, a bank rec is the last best check for understanding where people are stealing from you. That's why every accountant should do it. Again, I don't know why I get obsessed about this, but I think auto bank rec is like the best thing because it is the link between the theoretical accounting world your system's in and your real world cash going out the door. And if you don't do it consistently, you may wake up to find you're missing a lot of cash. When it comes to approving payments, which is the path of that, you should have a person involved. You should not have an agent be doing critical things like that because, one, I will say that just like people, agents are susceptible to errors, right? Like the way they act, may not have anticipated certain situations. And they are bad actors. There are folks who are very good at looking for weak points. And traditionally, the weakest link in security is people, right? Which you may say, oh, that means we should have more agents. People are open to manipulation, but that's again where segregation of duties is very critical because it prevents, kind of one person doing the wrong thing from completely undoing your control, your control structure. But agents are rigid, and if you try enough times, you'll understand what rules and limits they have in place to prevent things. So you might say, oh, we're only going to approve invoices, under $500. Okay, well, you end up with someone figuring that out and sending a bunch of $499 invoices, right? Oh, we're only going to do this auto approval if the vendor's been in place for 2 or more years, right? That's safe. Okay, well, someone's going to go find a vendor you haven't used in 10 years, but it's 10 years old. That's gold for them now, right? So there's things that and I had a LinkedIn thing on this that agents will be gamed, right? And so it's fine to have a review, a pass. I mean, that's what Predict does, right? We are the first line of doing all the coding work, right? But even I would suggest you need a person to review this, to prevent both errors and to prevent kind of fraud via gaming those agent controls. Um, so I think areas where you had historically segregation duties and human review you still need. Even though agents in theory could do it, I think it's going to be very risky, and I think we're going to, see some impressive frauds on folks figuring out the seams in those controls with agent, gated approvals.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and to expand upon this concept of like where does AI fit, and in relation to financial reporting, um, that's one area to be careful because although an LLM may be able to generate a particular report you're trying to produce correctly on the first try, like we've talked about before, after a number of iterations, just by its nature, it's non-deterministic. It can give you different results. So that's another use case or example where, sticking with custom reporting development is like the best approach, and then using the AI in order to help with surfacing insights or things like that. Um, and then Dave, you were talking about segregation of duties, and um, so even with our bank rec automation solution, we do keep human in the loop in the process. So while the automation handles, call it 85 to 90+% of the matching via automation, we still have the human in the loop to review those bank recs before they get finalized. And so we think that's an important part of the process as well.
Yeah, again, that's a great. I don't, I feel like this is turning into the bank rec podcast. But it's a great example, right? It's not necessarily valuable to have a human tick and tie, $300 from this thing to that thing. A good control process will make sure those things show up in a match, but then you need a person to look at them all, right, and to review them and to, confirm that, the activity you expect is there. So I think that's just it's a great example, closing the books, all these tasks, that control account, keeping that locked down and segregated, all these things really, they're there for a reason. And, we didn't create segregation of duties to create busy work. We created it because those are the weak seams of controls.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here, and I want to talk a little bit about the idea of building versus buying when it comes to some of the technology that we've been discussing. So, I think we've kind of touched a little bit, though. It's pretty relatively easy to use an LLM to create a prototype for a solution. So what do you think the difference between getting something to work once or getting something to work on a small scale and then turning it into a reliable solution that can actually operate at scale?
I can take a first shot at that because I've kind of done both, right? So my colony role, I built a lot of point solutions. I'm a builder, and so I can't help but try to attack them, and so I've experienced building something. Well, that's what PredictAP turned into at a small scale, and you can take a lot of shortcuts and limitations, and maybe covering 50% of the cases is enough, right? And when you build at scale, and also I think a lot of it has to do with how many people are involved, um, because you don't have to worry about controls and user access and data being shared. So when you're doing something for, hey, this is my job and my role, and this is a task I'm doing, and I want to automate that, the stakes are much lower, um, versus, hey, all of the company's financial data is going to flow through this process, right? And some people should see some parts, some people shouldn't see other parts, and some people can push things to certain places, all of that, and so it greatly increases the complexity, with all the controls and permissions and all that, and user management. Also, you need to think about, how it learns, how it retains data, right? This is where the one-off kind of, you know, individual build can be a challenge as well, because if that individual goes, all that knowledge goes about, how and what this does. So the scalable solution, should fit nicely and seamlessly into the overall workflow of a company. And I think this is where, some more recent prop techs may fail, is that they're great in isolation, but they're not really respecting the kind of the downstream and upstream aspects of what they're doing. And so a good tool should be an integration partner with the core ERP, right? Like I dealt with so many hacky solutions that did ETL or FTP, and like that just is not the way to do it. It leads to problems. But it should fit in, should be an interface partner, should work via API, and it should be kind of invisible once it's in place. It just feeds a workflow, right? And not be a swivel chair where it's, disrupting a workflow. Um, and it shouldn't be individual dependent, right? It should be, exist, before and after certain individuals. And so building at scale is much more challenging. And, I've had seeing that with Predict, how you do that to work well, not just for one client, but 10 and 50 and 100. It makes the product much, much better because you get the best practices from all those clients. But it is a challenge of how do you weigh those kind of wants and needs, and make it work, at scale. Because, and also, every company's very creative sometimes in how they do things, and so that can be a challenge, and making something that works in different situations.
Yeah, I would echo how you led in, Dana, saying that it is cool how quickly you can get something working in AI chat, be it Copilot, Claude, whatever you're working with, some impressive results quickly. But I think while you can do that, you'll reach a point where you find yourself still shepherding the process. You may have to continue pulling certain reports from systems, um, reviewing the outputs, and then you have to do something with that output later, maybe put it back into your property management system or something else. So in that case, you're being helped by AI, but you're still very hands-on. And I think in a lot of cases, you may reach a point where you want to even automate it even further. So when you're looking at incorporating things like automation tools or workflow tools to help with automatically pulling data or pushing data back to different systems via API or other means, that I think is where you may find yourself looking for vendors to help out with what you're trying to accomplish, to operate at a higher scale. And then another thing to think about, if as you're building solutions yourself, kind of playing around with things, is you'll likely see, as some of these leading AI companies put out new models, whatever you've built might start working differently than it had when you initially built it. Um, and so every time that happens, you might have to put in more time to get it working the way it was before. And so there's an aspect of a new kind of testing involved with uh, regression testing to review a number of different examples of what was the right result before and make sure it's still doing the same thing it should be. Um, yeah, so when
So
those kind of things come up, you might consider working with a vendor who incorporates a maintenance aspect into the service.
yeah, that's a whole big part of it is, and I think I like to make a big distinction between building with a one of these LLM tools versus building to run on an LLM tool. There's a lot of aspects of that. Neal brings up some great one, and it's interesting. We've absolutely, and call me a little bit conspiratorial, but it is funny how when a new model comes out with a higher, token price, the old model gets kind of dumb. These folks, they need to make money too. And so I'm much more apt to advocate for building with the tools. You need to be very intentional to know when you want to build to have this thing perpetually run on it. That goes back to the point Neal made of like a SQL report for reporting. You do it once, right? You hire redirect, they write the report, and you're done. That the cost is fixed, it's done, and you have a product you can depend upon every single time. If you were to do that same thing in an LLM, first off, it's not going to be right because it's non-deterministic. And every time you hit enter, it costs you money, and so that's not a good path. Um, so and that economic part shouldn't be ignored. It's funny to me how the software industry has gone from you spend $20 once to buy Excel, then you spend $20 a year to buy Excel, then you spend $20 a month to rent Excel, and now with LLMs, every time you hit enter, basically you're getting charged. It's like an infinite subscription model. And so if you build these tasks to run on it, you've also created a subscription that you're really locked into a certain provider, and you are certainly locked into a revenue, expense stream that you're not going to be able to escape. So be very, very intentional when you're actually using this to execute.
So then, with that in mind, how do you both think that organizations should decide whether a particular use case makes sense to build or whether it makes sense to purchase a point solution? Or try to figure out how to solve it using technology that they already have. Like what do you think the deciding factor should be when someone should try to do this themselves first?
Yeah, I think it's a very nuanced question. I mean, it'll vary from organization to organization, and factors such as the scale of your organization. Do you have large portfolio to support numerous like internal technical resources, or are you a smaller organization that's outsourcing certain back office functions? But I think there's definitely benefit in working with outside vendors rather than building up a full internal technology team and having all the associated technical infrastructure in-house. So really, I think it comes down to just asking questions like, what skills does my team have? What tools do I have available? And what kind of things do I want my team to be responsible for monitoring and maintaining going forward? So for certain simple use cases, that might be okay, but if you're working on complex workflows with different integrations, maybe that's not okay.
Sorry, I was getting my mute off there. Yeah, this is I think a very critical decision. And just a plug for PredictAP ebook. We talked to a lot of CTOs and put together an ebook, and it is not a PredictAP ad. It truly digs into this, and as Neal said, it's not a simple question, right? There's a lot of factors at play. So, link below, Dana, you can put that in there, but check it out. And we have kind of some great thoughts from a bunch of CTOs. And we actually did another one with Scott, who's a former CTO at RPM, around this. But Neal's point number one or Dana's point number one of like what's already there. I think so many firms don't take advantage of the functionality they already have with Yardi and MRI. There you go, links right there. That should be the first stop, right? When there's business problems, that's where, and again, back to the more fundamental, you need to start from the perspective of what's the business problem? What are you trying to solve? What are you trying to achieve? Is there something that does that? Not necessarily a new tool, but an old tool, right? And then, is this something, that scope question, right? What's the scope of what we're building? Is this an automation of a one person's thing, one person's job? How many people are going to interact? How much data is there? How we can keep up to date? All these questions about the complexity and risk associated with that, to understanding the problem, and then looking at, is there something good in the market? Because generally, um, most things, if there's a general problem, somebody has a really good solution. And PredictAP, we have 30 people, and we've raised lots of money, and we're fully focused on doing this really, really well. So, chances are we're going to solve this, in a more complete way. We're continuing to add features. We're learning from 100 companies, not just one. And so if there's a very solid solution in the market that fits with your existing ERP, you should evaluate it. Um, Something is very, very unique, very nuanced, or core to kind of the value proposition of your business, right? So something maybe around the investment side, or something that's really kind of adding alpha to your business, and is a real differentiator, then maybe it's something worth investing in. So you're kind of buying the core, building the edge, and building, and definitely trying to own more of what is critical to your, to kind of the core investment outcomes of your business. But it's complicated, and I'd say that generally, if there's a good solution that works, it's probably more cost effective and better than what you can build, and then you're not in the software maintenance business. But if it's core, it's more individual, or more specific to your firm, or discrete. Good way to buy, right? At least as a holdover until someone else solves it.
So Neal, you actually said something that I wanted to touch on a little bit more. So, not necessarily in like the buying technology space, but when do you think it's a good idea for a firm to consider to bring in outside expertise? So to bring in a redirect to maybe conduct a broader look at the business process, or to just kind of give that outside perspective on how to move forward with strategies like these.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that can lead you to look to bring in somebody from outside. So one of the challenges I talked about before was, for companies who are looking to innovate, you've got a lot of seats at the table with a lot of different ideas, which is a wonderful thing. But sometimes having like a framework to work through, such as business process review, helps to build direction through the organization. So through a framework, you can rally the group around a certain path forward, have a structure for gathering ideas, change management for working across different departments. And when you're working with an outside firm, you can also see it as an impartial viewpoint to help with the prioritization. So outcomes from something like that could be use case listings and prioritization, or process mappings. And then another scenario where companies are looking to bring in outside expertise would be, if you're building things yourselves, but you've reached your limit on your technical expertise, um, maybe you're looking to do something beyond just working with the chat interface, workflow, perhaps a workflow across different applications, such as moving data from your property management system to other SaaS applications, or maybe working with files in your enterprise cloud storage, things like that. Um, and so I think those are, yeah, the key areas where we get contact from clients.
I think there's a ton of spots you should bring in an outside expert. Any data conversions, ERP conversions, module integrations that are significant. I think um, uh, I think where the big ERPs have some challenges is connecting the dots between their modules. There's so much good functionality out there in these big ERPs, but for whatever reason, they tend to be very module specific. I'm a budget and forecasting guy. I do ledger stuff. I'm an investment accounting person, and sometimes the client ends up with a solution that doesn't have architecture that thinks about a process across the entire firm because all of these modules connect. How you set up your chart and segments and all of that affects budget, affects AP, it affects period close, it affects all of this. And that's where an outside consultant can be incredibly effective. Is that they can look across and tend to do a better job there, looking across all the modules, architecting a complete solution. Um, and getting more out of what's there, and solving more problems. I think that can be a frustration for folks where they switch to an ERP and they try to make it work like their old one, or they don't even know what they don't know about what is possible there, and it's so big and complicated. No one person can know all of what's available. I've been working in Yardi and MRI for 20 years, and I'm scratching the surface about what's there, and that's where these firms have experts on different areas. This is a CAM expert and a budget expert and a consolidation expert. So bring them in for that. Bring them in for that architectural view. And they're going to bring in learnings as well of other clients, right? How they did things and bring options and all that. So in those situations, you want to bring an outside expert in. And when you're working with them, I think also the other part is, um, I think the more successful implementations and upgrades have active participation. So I think the customer, and I've been a customer on the consulting side for most of my career, the more you at least understand what's going on, understand the options, understand what they're doing, and again how it connects, the better you're going to be after that, right? Because then you start to build a plan for longer term improvements. So I think you should be an active participant and understand the what and the why, and they go do it with the how and the execution. So
So we're reaching kind of the end here. I want to touch really quick on what do you both think the biggest barriers are preventing CRE organizations from moving beyond this kind of experimentation phase and pilot projects into meaningful organization-wide adoption of some of these technologies?
Um, I think, sorry, you want to go, Dave?
no, you can go for it if you got an idea. I have an idea too, but
Okay. Yeah, I think a foundational place to start is always just the training or building some kind of awareness and understanding of what the possibilities are, and not just conceptually, but also with some hands-on aspects. So I think it's important for organizations and leadership to like set up their staff to have the opportunity to spend time learning about AI, playing around with AI. Of course, set up your permitted uses, prohibited uses to keep things safe. But I think that really sets the stage so that people have a sense of what's possible, like what's going to work with this new technology and what isn't going to work consistently. And then having worked with it hands-on, you start to have some comfort and understanding of how you can effectively validate results and like how much do I have to review what's coming back to me. Um, so I think although we don't expect everybody to become an AI expert, I think it's important to get some kind of foundation so that you can see what's in the realm of possibility and then maybe work with the right experts to fully build that out.
yeah, I think it's not just an AI issue, but I think generally change management is a challenge for adoption, and um, there's a lot of reasons why it's difficult. I think a lot of real estate firms, I've yet to see a real estate firm that has just a ton of capacity to go do projects, right? I think real estate tends to be pretty lean. There's a lot going on. There's pressure to close the books. There's market pressures around it. It's overwhelming how much is out there. I've gone from the buyer side where everyone's your friend to the seller side where people fear your call. And there is a lot of prop tech. I go to the conferences, I'm like, geez, there's a lot of companies, and I feel bad for the poor we have REIT badge where the person who's buying software walking down the halls and they have to keep their eyes, don't make eye contact, because there's so many options out there, both from the big established ERPs who have a huge menu of modules out there, and from all the, point solution, best in breed point solutions out there on the prop tech side that are solving real problems, but it can be really overwhelming. So I think trying to have that understanding of what the goal is, what problems can we solve. And again, I think the days of the, unless you're doing an ERP conversion, and by the way, the bar should be extremely high for, sorry, redirect, but I know consultants love ERP conversions, but the bar should be pretty high for making a conversion because it's painful, right? And so, there has to be a really good reason. If you're on JDE, like it's time to get off JDE, right? Like the sunset's coming. And if there's, if we had an issue at Colony with consolidation, like we needed to address that, and we did. But with that good reason, you really need to understand the problem you want to solve. We've said that a lot of times on here. And then explain to people why it's helpful, right? And then I think having some small wins and alleviating concerns around. I think it's another thing with AI where folks are concerned, maybe a little less now because they realize, AI it's not perfect all the time, but fear around, is this replacing my job? Am I going to become redundant because of this? Am I, bringing in the project that's gonna remove my role? Alleviating all that, getting incremental wins, making things better. That starts to build momentum on it, and the fear of these things going poorly, I think that's the biggest hurdle. It's that, right? And I think good consultants and good prop tech firms should explain how this will actually happen, right? What the expectation should be for the process of it, and make it as easy as possible. No one has time for, maybe a solution is going to have a little bit of an impact, but the commitment to get it going is going to take months. Like maybe that's not worth it. But I think if you do the making the onboarding as easy as possible, it alleviates all those concerns, and good project management will alleviate the biggest hurdle, which is I think change management. But that's not AI new. It's been like that forever.
Yeah. Okay, and then our last question, looking ahead at the next 12 months, where do you expect CRE organizations to increase their investment in AI and automation? And what do you think companies should be doing now to prepare for where the market is heading?
I'll take that first. I think that there's going to be more use around agents for internal tasks, follow-ups, routing, things like that, triaging. I think that's an area. I do think everyone should be considering. So, tools are by their nature tools, and they can be put to good uses and bad uses. I think folks need to be more concerned than they are about um, bad actors using AI. I think the risk of fraud is greater. I'm not the best speller in the world, and so I have a joke internally at PredictAP. If like the email is perfectly spelled, like it's probably spam. It's the opposite of what it used to be. Where I think the thing about AI is not just that it can be more believable, better researched, but it can be done at scale with a lot of fidelity, right? And so, um, especially when it comes to payments and things like that, you need to be on the lookout for this and bringing modern tools to bear against it. So I think growth is going to be around agents and some really good point solutions that are out there, like Neal mentioned. And then I think we're going to start to see some more defensive uses coming online to combat potentially pretty sophisticated attempts to defraud.
Yeah, I guess in terms of looking ahead over the next 12 months, I think it's important that companies experimenting with AI start with AI assistance, or meaning like single or small number of steps involved in a process. And then after there's comfort around that, build into what you could call agentic solutions, which are broader multi-step processes. Um, and as organizations are progressing towards those more advanced multi-step processes, um, there will start to emerge a need for a new type of solution, yet another solution, meaning AI governance. So that would be a way to control the connections to different applications in your technology stack, manage and monitor the usage of AI, the status of different processes that you have running. Also provides a way to audit what's being done. And then these type of tools can also incorporate ability to set up things to run on schedules or based on triggers. So I think that's a technology solution area that's currently evolving as companies are getting more mature with their use of AI. And so I think in the meantime, like as you're preparing for where things are going, I think it's important to continue like evaluating the different tool options out there, what's working well for you, talk with your peers as to what's working. And that way you can kind of solidify your strategy going forward as to what products you'll be utilizing. And from that point, you'll build out the detail on how you'll govern it in the future.
Great. Well, that brings us to the end then. Thank you both so much for your time today. I hope that this was informative for everyone. For those of you who are still on, the recording will be going out as soon as it renders. And I hope to see you all at our next webinar. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Neal.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks,
Bye.
Dan.
Bye bye.